Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
Just to remind everyone, I'm AJ Wellman, Solutions Architect, and you're watching Databricks Skill Builder on DeltaShare and Marketplace. Tim Sepp, who's here, is going to be the product specialist doing the majority of the demo. I will be manning questions. We also have a chat window, so feel free to ask questions, and occasionally we may even just turn you live so you can ask your question live. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim.
Perfect. And just to add to that, yeah, if you have a question that you want to ask, for the broader group, go ahead and raise your hand by hitting the raise hand icon at the bottom of Zoom. But good morning, everyone. AJ introduced me to a few folks here, but my name is Tim Sepp. I'm a senior solution architect working with our data partners in the marketplace and Delta sharing world. In today's skill builder, we're going to take a look at Delta sharing, which provides an open solution to securely share live data from your Lakehouse to any computing platform, as well as a quick overview of the Databricks Marketplace. We'll go through the benefits, use cases, considerations of sharing data through Delta sharing. Let me get this shared here. Of course, I need to change the security setting here really fast. Bear with me one moment. All right. So what is Delta sharing? Delta sharing is the ability to make the same data available to one or many stakeholders, both external and internal. Nowadays, the ever-growing amount of data has become a strategic asset for any company. Delta sharing within your organization or externally is an enabling technology for data commercialization and enhanced analysis. Sharing data as well as consuming data from external sources allows companies to collaborate with partners, establish new partnerships, and generate new revenue streams with data monetization. Data sharing can deliver benefits to groups across the enterprise. For those business groups, data sharing can get them access to data needed to make critical decisions. More and more organizations must exchange data with their customers, suppliers, and partners. Security is critical, and efficiency and immediate accessibility are equally important. To be truly data-driven, organizations need a better way to share data. Gartner predicts that by 2023, organizations that promote data sharing will outperform their peers on most business value metrics. And the old view of don't share data unless is being replaced with a must share data unless mindset. And by recasting data sharing as a business necessity, data and analytic leaders will have access to the right data at the right time, enabling more robust data and analytic strategies that deliver benefit to the business and create overall more value for the business. Here are some of the use cases we often see. With internal lines of business sharing, different departments, lines of business, and subsidiaries seek to share data so that everyone can make decisions based on a complete view of the current business reality. For example, finance and HR departments need to share data as they analyze the true cost of each employee. With business-to-business sharing, we see companies strive to share data with partners and suppliers as easily as they share it across their own organizations. For example, retailers and their suppliers continue to work closely together as they seek to keep their products moving in an era of ever-changing consumer tastes. And lastly, there's data monetization. And this is the area I work in. Companies across industries are commercializing data, and this segment continues to grow. Large multinational organizations have formed exclusively just to monetize data, while other organizations are looking for ways to monetize their own data and generate additional revenue streams. Data vendors are growing in importance as companies realize they need external data for better decision-making. These use cases have their differences, but the common thread and benefits we're hearing are the same. The data provider loves that they can provide secure, ready-to-query data to anyone, regardless of the compute platform. And the data recipients are happy that they have the latest data available without needing any ETL processes to view the data. Here are some of the solutions we commonly see. Companies are still delivering data through FTP, SSH, and other methods. They worked previously, but many have issues as technology and data has evolved. And these homegrown solutions have some cons associated with them. For instance, it takes significant effort to extract data from the cloud storage, transform it, and host it on an FTP server for different recipients. Additionally, this approach results in creating copies of the data. Data copying causes duplication and prevents organizations from instantly accessing live data. Even more significantly, homegrown solutions are typically built on complex architectures due to replication and provisioning. This can add considerable time to data sharing activities and result in out-of-date data for end consumers. And data recipients have to extract, transform, and load the shared data for their end use cases, which further delays the time to insight. With any new update the provider publishes, the recipients have to rerun ETL pipelines again and again. As modern data requirements become more stringent, homegrown and legacy technologies have become much more difficult to secure and govern. And these solutions are costly to manage and maintain, and oftentimes it's hard for them to scale in order to accommodate larger data sets. Commercial data sharing solutions are a popular option among companies that don't want to devote the time and resources to building an in-house solution, yet also want more control than what cloud object storage can offer. The cons in this model are that commercial solutions don't work across other platforms well. While data sharing is easy among fellow customers, it's usually impossible for those who use competing solutions. This reduces the reach of data, resulting in vendor lock-in. Also, differences in platforms between data providers and data recipients introduce complexity in data sharing. Data must also be loaded onto the platform, requiring additional ETL and data copies. And lastly, the cost. The challenges I've just mentioned create additional costs for sharing data with consumers, as data providers have to replicate data for different recipients on different cloud platforms. And this is why we've come up with a new approach we call Delta sharing. Databricks designed Delta sharing with 5 goals in mind: to provide strong security, auditing, and governance, to share live data without copying it to another system, to support a wide range of tools such as Power BI, Tableau, Apache Spark, Pandas, and Java, and provide flexibility to consume data using tools of choice for BI, machine learning, and AI use cases. To scale the massive structured data sets and also allow the sharing of unstructured data and future data assets such as ML models, dashboards, and notebooks, and to provide an open cross-platform sharing solution. By eliminating the obstacles and shortcomings associated with typical data sharing approaches, Delta sharing delivers several key benefits, including the ability for data providers to grant, track, audit, and even revoke access to shared data sets from a single point of enforcement in order to meet compliance and other regulatory requirements, the ability to share live data without the need of data replication or any physical movement of data. Data providers can update their data sets reliably in real time and provide a fresh and consistent view of their data to recipients. Data recipients don't have to be on the Databricks platform or on the same cloud, as Delta sharing works across clouds and even from cloud to on-premise setups. To give customers even greater flexibility, Databricks has also released open source connectors for Pandas, Apache Spark, and Python, and is working with partners on many more. Delta sharing lowers the cost of managing and consuming shares for both data providers and recipients. Providers can share data from their cloud object store without replicating, thereby reducing the cost of storage. And Delta sharing eliminates the need to set up new ingestion processes to consume data. Data recipients can directly access the fresh data and querying it using tools of their choice. Recipients can also enrich data with data sets from popular data providers. The Delta sharing ecosystem of open source and commercial partners continues to grow every day. Delta sharing is designed to be simple, scalable, non-proprietary, and cost-effective for organizations that are serious about getting more from their data. Delta sharing is natively integrated with Unity Catalog, which enables customers to add fine-grained governance and security controls, making it easy and safe to share data internally or externally. Delta sharing is a simple REST protocol that securely grants temporary access to part of the cloud data set. It leverages modern cloud storage systems such as S3 or ADLS to reliably grant read-only access to large data sets. Delta sharing works by following these simple steps. The provider can set up the Delta sharing server for their existing data lake, which can be on AWS or Azure or soon on Google Cloud. The provider then sets up sharing rules or access permissions on the sharing server, which specify which consumer has access to what data set. Once the share is established, the recipient authenticates to the sharing server and asks to query a specific table. The recipient can also provide filters on the data as a hint to read just a subset of that data. The server verifies whether the recipient is allowed to access the data, it logs the request, and then determines which data to send back. This will be a subset of the data objects in the cloud object storage that make up the table. To allow temporary access to the data, the server generates short-lived pre-signed URLs, and these are about an hour in terms of their life. And these allow the recipient to read these Parquet files directly from the cloud provider so that the read-only access can happen in parallel at massive bandwidth. Currently, Delta sharing supports Parquet, so any client that reads Parquet can support Delta shares. This makes it easy for consumers to read shared data from their compute of choice, and providers don't need to transfer any data. And again, it's secure, audited, and governed. Data sharing organizations need an option and secure approach to data sharing. Delta sharing answers this need without imposing any restrictions or any additional costs. It's the first ever open protocol, an open standard for sharing a data set securely. Organizations can easily share existing large-scale data sets without moving data. When both the provider and the consumer are using the Databricks platform, we're able to offer more benefits. When the sharing connection is fully managed by Databricks, providers no longer need to create and manage token-based credentials for each consumer. The sharing connection is established directly and securely through our platform. There's no need to exchange, there's no token exchange involved and no token management required. A recipient on Databricks also has access to a UI integrated with the Data Explorer, where they can view the data shared with them and even import shared data as a catalog on UC. Then they can work with the data as they normally would on Databricks, run queries or jobs against it, create dashboards, visualizations, and so on. So it's basically, again, just a standard catalog that you would see in your Data Explorer. And lastly, when the sharing connection is fully managed by Databricks, the recipient and provider do not need to be on the same cloud platform. One can be on AWS while the other can be on Azure, and still no data copy is involved, making Delta sharing on Databricks truly cross-cloud. When the data recipient isn't on Databricks, the setup is still simple, but has two additional steps. For each consumer, the sharing server generates an activation link, which the provider sends to the consumer. We'll take a look at this in a little bit. And the consumer downloads a token file containing their credentials. The consumer then uses these credentials to configure any of the Delta sharing clients like Pandas, Spark, or Power BI to consume the data from their computing platform of choice. Also, Delta sharing now supports change data feeds. In addition to sharing a table, a data provider can choose to include the table's CDF, allowing recipients to query changes between specific versions or timestamps of the data. With this feature, recipients can query just the new data or the incremental changes instead of the entire table each time. A data provider can easily share a table with CDF, and the data recipient can query a table or query table changes with a simple syntax that they may be familiar with already. The release of Delta sharing is the first and prime step into the larger vision of data collaboration on the Lakehouse. It will allow providers and consumers to easily take part in the Databricks Marketplace, where they'll be able to quickly and easily find new data that will enrich their internal data, share notebooks and solution accelerators that will enhance their understanding of the data and quickly deliver results, and provide and receive ML models, and turn data really into insights quicker than with any other solution. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to jump into a quick demo of Delta sharing. And again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And if you have something that you want to ask directly, please raise your hand and we'll answer the question. All right, hopefully I'm sharing the right screen here with Delta sharing. Looks good on my side. So what I'm going to run through here is just a simple workbook showing Delta sharing, and I'm going to deviate a little bit here and there. So I want to show you guys the UI for Delta sharing. I'm going to go through the SQL syntax. Another thing I do want to highlight here is all of this can be done via API. However, I don't have any API calls in here. Just know it's available. If there's any interest in setting that up, we can get you documentation on that. A few things to touch on just in my environment here is I have two different areas set up. So you'll see up top here, I have provider, and I have in the provider, I've got the notebook and I've got the Data Explorer. So this is just going to show the data that we're sharing and how it's being shared. And then I have a separate environment here, which you can see through the different URL, which is really the recipient side. So I'll get the notebook set up here, and then I'm going to have the Data Explorer set in this area. And I just need to do a quick pause real fast to open something up. All right. And back to this screen. So a couple of things I want to touch on here just with Delta sharing in general is just some of the terminology. And I'm going to focus more from the provider side at first and kind of dip into the recipient. The recipient side is very easy to get set up. But a few things to note on Delta sharing is you have to be on Unity Catalog, and you have to have at least one Metasort in Unity Catalog. You also need to enable Delta sharing within the admin panel. And on the terminology front here, I want to give you, the terms that I'll be using as to not confuse you a little bit. Provider and recipient, pretty self-explanatory. The provider's sharing data out, recipients going to be, taking these shares and using them internally, bringing them in from the provider. A share is really just a read-only collection of tables and table partitions that can be shared with the recipients. These shares can have data from any catalog, so you can mix and match. You're not limited by the catalog. Again, it's tables, partitions now. We will be sharing views, materialized views here in the future. I'm going to reference D2D or D2O. So D2D is Databricks to Databricks. So that's when you have two Databricks customers sharing data between each other. And this is a very fast and easy setup. And then D2O, which is going to be the Databricks to other or Databricks to open. So this would be, let's say you as a data provider sharing data out to somebody who is going to be using it, let's say in Power BI. Again, easy setup, just requires a few extra steps. And then with Delta sharing, it really is simple. You have a few steps here. One is to create the recipient or the share. The order of operations doesn't matter, but you can create either. And then what you do is you take that share and that recipient and you associate those two. So you would take, let's say, mix and match of tables, associate one of your end customers to it, click on that share, associate the two of them, and then they'll be able to instantly query the data as soon as you make that connection. Here's a quick high-level architecture overview of how Delta sharing works, and we'll be focusing from the right side there where the data consumer exists. So you see the data consumer data plane on the right. And in the step one there, we're just issuing the query. So this would be, for a specific table. When you write the query to that table, it's going to go to the Delta sharing server, which, in a Databricks setup is hosted within Unity Catalog. And from there, Unity Catalog is going to go through the authentication. It will confirm that the token that's being exchanged is valid. It's going to consume who has access to what, if there's any sort of IP access controls, and really deal with the authorization of the query. And then once that is authenticated, it's going to send back a temporary list of URLs. And these lists are, again, pointed back to the data store from the data provider side. These are ephemeral, last, like I said, about an hour or so. And if they, let's say don't run any analysis within an hour, they'll just have to requery the data. So very simple to overcome the issues there. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo just using the UI for now, and then we'll go through creating the share, creating the recipient from a SQL standpoint. So I'm going to go back over to this Data Explorer side just so I can keep this up. And within the Data Explorer, when you have Delta sharing enabled, you'll see this new object that's just titled Delta sharing. And in there, you're going to have everything that's either shared by me, again, going out, shared with me, anything coming in. I've set up a couple shares already through or from some internal demos. So I'm going to take a quick look at the data that I created. I have this Tech Tours catalog, and this is something that is just sitting in my Data Explorer. This is data I own. And in here, I have this market data schema. And within that schema, I just have some basic tables around financial data. So stock prices for a handful of tickers, IPO calendar, economic indicators, so on and so forth. So just a small sample data set. And this is what I'm going to be sharing out. So within the Delta sharing object, you create a share up on the top right side here by clicking on new share or share data, excuse me. And you would just create a share name, and this can be any arbitrary name. Add a comment. Usually best practices in this comment are, what the data is, what the share is for, who it's for, what the specific purpose is around a share. And then when you want to create a new recipient, and again, you don't have to do this in any specific order. You can create the share, add recipients to it later, and vice versa. But when you create a new recipient, this is going to be, the area that you would determine if it's let's say Databricks to Databricks or Databricks to open source. So when you create a new recipient, you simply name the recipient that you're adding, and then you would either add the sharing identifier or omit this. And this is kind of a key point in how it's structured. So if you provide the sharing identifier, And this would be from the data recipient. The data recipient would send over their sharing identifier. And this is really just the Metastore ID in Databricks that the consumer would have. And I will show you where you can also find this on the recipient side. It is just in the Data Explorer. We'll touch on that here momentarily. If you omit this, it's going to basically create that Databricks to open. So I'm going to go ahead and omit this right now. And in doing so, it is going to create this activation link. And I'll just show you this really fast. This activation link is, the link back to the server as well as the bearer token. And if I click on this, you can see it just gives, you would send this URL back to the person that, may be needing to access shared data through one of these tools. They would just simply download this credential file and reference that in their tool of choice. And at that point, they're open and ready to connect to the share and do any analytic processes that they need. So once we have the share created, and I'm going to go back to the one that I had previously set up, which is that, if I could type here, which is that Tech Tours. So this Tech Tours test is the share that I created, and this was back in December. Oops, I apologize, I'm on the recipient side here. Here's my Tech Tours share. And the Tech Tours share, you can see I have some market data. I have some other tables that I brought in for other use cases, but my market data is here. You can manage any of the recipients that are associated with a given share just by clicking on the recipients. You can go through, delete any recipients, or revoke access to the share. And you can easily go in and make adjustments to the tables. So let's say I want to edit the tables that are given in this share. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove some of these others from I have an NFL data set here, and I'm going to remove those from my share. And I'm just going to make sure that I have everything that I want selected from the Tech Tours. And also note that, again, up top, you can select any catalog, any schema that you have access to. So I'm going to go ahead and add my IPO calendar back, and we'll go ahead and save the table options here. And we can see that my share has now been updated with that financial data that I highlighted from my Data Explorer. So once that's set, and you've created the share, you've created the recipient, and if it's a Databricks to open or a D2O, and you sent the link over, they'll be able to access the data immediately. If you do get the sharing identifier, or it's a Databricks to Databricks connection, the handshake on the back end takes place immediately. So as soon as you grant them as a recipient and give them access to a share, they'll be able to query instantly. And jumping back over to the notebook, that really is it with the UI. Again, just recipient, share, associate those two, make sure that there's table in the share, and they're good to go. And I'll step through the SQL commands here. You're going to see that they're very similar to what we just did in the UI. And I am going to be reusing, a lot of the same names here for the shares, for the tables, so on. But you can see just creating a share is a simple SQL call to create share if not exists. And I'm just feeding in some additional information here, comments around what the data is. And when you execute that statement, you'll get back this metadata. You can call that metadata later on just by using this describe share, which again just gives you the info when it was created, who created it, and any comments that are in there. And then to add the tables to the share, it's just simply alter share. So you would alter the share, which again, the share name is what we created here. And then we're going to add tables based off the catalog, the schema, and the table that we want to add. And that will associate those tables to a given share. And then this is just a quick call for some metadata. What is in the share that I created? So we can see that I've just added the market data that we took a look at. And then here's the call to create a recipient. In this case, this is going to be a Databricks to Databricks because I've added the using ID parameter here. And this will again immediately create that connection on the back end between a Databricks customer and myself. If I omit that using ID, it's going to return in my output here. It's going to return that hyperlink back to the sharing credential file that I showed you in the browser. And then here I'm just associating the recipient I created. So I created the tech recipient, and then the tech tour share is the share I created, and then they'll have access to that data. And later on, you can go through and show who's been granted access, to what given share. So we can see that that Tech Summit recipient has select privileges on my Tech Tour share. So that's it really for creating the share and associating a recipient to it. Can be done through the UI, through SQL, and again through the API. And then a couple other things to look at. I touched on the CDF in the presentation. So CDF is the change data feed, and this will enable your your end users or the recipients that you're working with to just see what's changed from a given date or from a given version of Delta. And to enable that, you just simply use the alter share SQL call here for the Tektor share. And then on this particular table, which is the IPO calendar, I am enabling CDF, so with change data feed. And this is actually on the, I skipped over this part here, but this is on the table itself. This is in the share. So I'm just enabling the change data feed within that given table. And then again, I push that out to the share using this call here. And then in Command 18, I'm just simply doing a few updates. So two changes where I changed the price range low for this particular ticker, and then I'm just deleting this ticker here. And I kick that off, and we can see that in the described history of that table. And again, this is on the table itself directly, what's been pushed through there. So we can see the update took place. We can see that the delete took place. And if we run a quick query just to see what happened, we can see the update pre and post image and the delete taking place on that ticker. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to the recipient side. Sorry, I've got the pop-up here. There we go. And on the recipient side, really, really quick and easy to set up everything. So the sharing identifier is one key, that we'll look at here that you need to get over to the data provider if you're going to be recipient. And if you're not, a Databricks customer and you want to use this through another tool, you can, again, just request access and they'll send you that URL with the credential file. But on the recipient side, we would take a look at once access is set up. There's going to be this shared with me, and this will be, if you have Unity catalog set up for Delta sharing, you'll see this no matter what. You have access to the sharing identifier here. Again, Metastore ID, but we'll call it the sharing identifier within the Delta sharing world. And I'm just going to paste that in there so you can see it's the Metastore ID. And that Metastore ID you would send over to the provider, and they could put that in, grant you access. Once they give you access to a given share, and this is the provider from this side over here that I set up, it's the Databricks Field Eng. Once they give you access to the data, you would go into that provider and you would see the shares that they have created for you. So we'll take a look at our Tektor's recipient. This is how you would see a given share from a provider. And I've already created a catalog with this. You can see that it's called Tektor's recipient. If you hadn't created a catalog already, there would be a button here that says create catalog. And let me see if there's any out there. Yeah, we've got a good one here. So if you click on this create catalog, it's going to prompt you to create the catalog name. So this is what would show up just in your Data Explorer as a standard catalog, and then any comments you wanted to add to it. And that's how you would just add anything that's been shared with you to your Data Explorer or any catalogs that you've created. So if we go ahead and I'm going to go back out to the catalog here. I forget what I had called this, Tektor's. Tektor's recipient right in front of me. So you can see this Tektor's recipient. If we click on this, it is set up as Delta sharing, as denoted up top here. You'll see, between, let me see if I can find a good table here. That's Delta sharing. So you can see this is a standard catalog, no Delta sharing listed in there, but Tektor's recipient, Delta shared. We can see the data that I have shared over from my provider side. And as a recipient, you can go through and add, permissions around this. So if you, need to restrict this to a specific group or a specific person, you can do that through the permissioning here. And that's really it from a recipient side, within Databricks. As I mentioned a few times, if your Databricks is open, you're just going to download that credential file and you're going to get this access through those means. And again, multiple ways to do this: API, UI, or SQL. So I just kind of run through some of the SQL calls here. I want to get my current Metastore ID. This is what I provide the provider. And then once I send that over, they would create the connection and it would be established. And at that point, we can go through and start, using our queries. But I want to highlight a few of the metadata calls here. As a recipient, you can use the show providers SQL statement here to see who you have access from, so you can see all the providers. You can describe a provider, so who that provider is, any information that they've put in there. I kind of left this bare bones, but you could see the comment, the Metastore ID that they're coming from. And then if you wanted to drive that whole process of creating a catalog from SQL, quick and easy with the create catalog, if not exists, using the share. And that's it. Once you have that set up from a provider standpoint, from a recipient standpoint, you can go ahead and just start using this data as if it sits in your system natively. So I'm just, running a quick select statement here on the daily price table, looking for all of the data from Apple. And then just a few other simple statements, building some aggregations to see what the high close was over 2022 and the low. And then just building visualizations with that same data. So I'm looking at the unemployment rate using the econ indicators that's been shared with me. And then on the CDF side, same thing, we can just run standard queries. So I only want to see data that is coming from the table changes on that IPO calendar. Remember, back on the provider side, that was the only table I enabled, but we want to see everything from this specific version. You can use version, you can use the timestamps. So very flexible on that front. If you only wanted to pull, let's say, the deltas from the last time you ran any year analysis, you can do it by putting in the date, or if you happen to know the version, you can run the version, but very flexible in how that would be pulled out. And we can see in here that, that I have made the updates to the data. Let me find the column here. So the update post image and update pre-image, you see I went from 5.5 and 6.5 to 10 and 25, and we can see that this is deleted. And again, that's using this table changes call. If I were to just request the data from the catalog only, or from the the shared catalog, you'll see that obviously this particular ticker has been deleted because we can see that took place, and we can see that we're looking at the 10 and 25 of the updates. So flexible in that you have the full history, but the the standard table itself has those changes that have been reflected through any of the changes made on the provider side. And then really quick, I'm going to stop sharing here. I just want to give you guys a quick view of Databricks to open source. So bear with me one moment here while I switch computers. And I'm actually jumping over to another computer here. And really fast, I want to show you, this is using Power BI. And using Power BI is very easy. You would just go into Get Data and look for the Delta Share connector. Sorry, my Power BI is a little slow at times. If I type in Delta, you can see Delta sharing. I already have this set up for now, so it's going to ask me to connect. But what would happen if you didn't have a connection already established is it's going to ask you for the URL to the server and the bearer token. And those are found in the file that you would download as a consumer. And you would simply paste those in, and then it's going to show you everything that's available within a given share. So you can see I only brought in the one table in this case, which is that daily price. But I could pull in any data that's available through my share. And then once you have access to that, you can start building out your dashboards. So this is querying that same table that we were looking at on the recipient side in real time, and being able to kick through different tickers or go through different timeframes. So very flexible from a Power BI standpoint. Connectors coming soon for Tableau, and then there's many others. Pandas, the Spark connectors, C++, Rust. We have quite a few that you can connect with and pull data from shares in real time. The other connector I've grown to like here is this, and this is a third-party connector. It's through this company called Exponom. They have a free tier, but then if you were to grow beyond that, you would have to go into a paid-for service. But I really enjoy their free connector here, and that's what I have access to. And this Exponom connector allows you to read from Delta sharing. So if I click on this Delta sharing icon, and what you would do to set this up is you click on this icon, you map back to those share files that are downloaded through that URL that I showed earlier. Once you click on that, it's going to show you what you have access to in those shares. So I have my stock data set up here, and I'm just going to click on the daily price. And with this, I can go through and build out any filtering. So let's filter for, we'll go ahead and pull Apple back. Oh, my mouse is jumpy. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that, and it's going to filter all the data that's in that pricing table for just Apple. And then once I have what I need, and you can build multiple filters in here, but I'm going to go ahead and import that into Excel. And once that pulls all of the data from my Delta share, it'll drop it into a table here, or into a worksheet. And we have all of our data. So this is really useful for those end users that you may work with that don't want to write SQL. They don't want to write Python code, but they need extracts. You could build out a table, share it directly with them, and then they could just use this tool to bring the data into Excel, or somewhere that they're comfortable with, Power BI or Excel, and have access to it in a format that again makes it easy for them to work with. And then this really shows a lot of what's happening on the back end within Delta Share. So you can see the files that are pulled down, how many rows were pulled in, and what took place in terms of our filtering. So we just filtered on Apple, and we can see that here. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to jump back in really quick. How are we doing on time, AJ? We got 20 minutes still?
21 minutes.
Okay, perfect. All right, and back into the presentation. We're going to just take a quick look at Marketplace. So Databricks Marketplace right now is in private preview. So we're still working through some initial onboarding here. We do have data providers up, and we're looking to get consumers set up with the access to private preview soon. So if that's of interest, do let your account team know, and we can look to whitelist the workspace that you're in for access to the marketplace. But really, what we're seeing here is that data consumers are still frustrated with current processes for gaining value from data. First, getting access to external data can have its challenges. And on this slide, it outlines some of the challenges that typical data scientists or analysts go through when finding data. First, you got to get through the red tape, databasing the data, dealing with the challenges involved, and then the data wrangling. You have to clean the data, make it usable, and then the analysis, which is the evaluation of the data, understanding its use cases, and making sense of if it's still, if it's really worth you kind of going through the whole process of building out the connection for this data. As you move down the processes of all of this, it's iterative and can take some time to get through. Even when they go to a marketplace to discover data, they still have some big challenges, doing all the messy work to use the data, spending time to deeply learn about the data set, and then make use of the data. Even if the data is discoverable, it doesn't mean that it's easy to use. The data analysis part itself can be lengthy because the consumers may be new to the data set, they're unfamiliar with the various use cases or how to best use the data. And this steepens the learning curve and increases the work to get value from the data. Sorry, I click through these. Most marketplaces out there have a way for you to discover data and access it within their proprietary data platform, but not much else. Discovering data is just the tip of the iceberg. Consumers are looking for a lot more. They need the context behind the data set to see how it's valuable and how it can be applied to their use case. The missing pieces to this include quality evaluations, insights, and analytics. These help form the full picture that consumers are looking for. With the Databricks Marketplace, not only can we provide quick access to data, but we'll be able to share other forms of data assets, allowing data consumers to quickly gain insights with the data that they're receiving. These include notebooks, dashboards, machine learning models, and solution accelerators. Within the notebooks, data providers will be able to deliver key insights and analysis, allowing consumers to quickly see if the content will augment their current data and analytics strategy. Producers can also add all of the needed context, such as schema diagrams, data dictionaries, and any links to research by using Markdown within the notebooks. And for data producers, this shortens their sales cycles and support needs. And for the data consumer, this allows them really to self-service and quickly ramp up their knowledge of the data. And then I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Databricks dashboards, but they're a feature that allow users to create visual representations of the data using drag and drop interfaces. These dashboards can be used to provide insights into data in real time and can be shared with others in the organization. These provide a powerful tool for data analysis and visualizations, allowing users to gain insights into their data quickly and easily and share those insights with others. Producers will be able to create and display insightful information and pass these along to consumers through Delta Share. So, they'll be able to, again, create the queries on the back end, create the dashboards. They're just widgets that you would drag and drop into the dashboards, and then share those out with the end data consumer. These features will help alleviate many of the frustrations for the data consumers. They'll be able to quickly discover new data and clearly see the value in the content that they're researching. Access to the data is quick using Delta sharing, as we just saw, and data providers will be able to provide the needed data assets, allowing the consumers to quickly ramp up their knowledge and implementation timelines. And for data providers, Marketplace will allow them to speed up their sales cycles by providing the data assets, monetize not only their data, but the full end-to-end solutions using those assets, dashboards, solution accelerator, so on, and really just streamline the delivery across all clouds. So I always like to highlight that part. I don't think I did it justice when we were going through the Delta Share, but it is cross-cloud. You share from AWS to Azure, Azure to AWS or GCP, and that can be done quickly and easily. There's really no additional setup to move across cloud. And from a data provider standpoint, this is really just the call to action. So if me as a data consumer goes out, sees the data set I want, I would just click on the Get Data, and we'll take a look at this momentarily. But I would click on the Get Data button, and if they have data that they want to either instantly share, or let's say it's public data, you can click on the Get Data button now, you create the catalog, and then you have immediate access to that data from that Marketplace tile. If it requires a bit more negotiations, let's say there's bespoke data that needs to be brought into a share, what that button will do is kind of create this call to action, which will send notification to the data provider that I want to see that data. And then it would give me the opportunity to work with the data provider to then set up that bespoke data set, and then they would create the Delta Share and have that over to me as quickly as possible. And one other thing to note, Databricks is not involved in the commercials. It's directly completed between the provider and consumer, and we do not take a fee. Another thing to highlight is on the Delta Share, that's a free service as well. So what we're seeing here today is entirely free from the Databricks perspective. And when I say they, I mean Delta sharing and Marketplace inclusion. And then here are our milestones to GA. Like I mentioned, we are in private preview right now. We will go into public preview, guessing around the middle of April or so, and that will include support for all clouds. Right now, the private preview for Marketplace is AWS only. So we're looking for the Azure and GCP, mid April timeframe, and then that will also support a private marketplace, which is exciting to me. So the private marketplace, or you'll hear it referenced sometimes as internal marketplace, would be the marketplace, but only for your team. This would be an area. Yes, thank you, Mimi. And good call out. Delta sharing is GA right now, so that's fully live. What I'm talking about now with Marketplace is in private preview. So just know that Delta sharing is available, but Marketplace in private preview at this moment. Going back, we'll have support for that notebook sharing. Right now, notebooks are just embedded into the listings, but data providers will be able to provide the notebooks, for download through Delta sharing. And then that private marketplace will be, just a marketplace for internal stakeholders. So if you're part of a large organization, we all know large organizations have siloed and segmented data, but you need access to some of that. They could put that data out in a private marketplace. So the rest of the world does not see it, but everybody within your organization could, and they could gain access, just like we've been discussing here, by clicking on that Get Data button, and whoever controls that data would grant you access. So I'm excited about that piece. I had previously worked at a company that had a lot of siloed data, and it was such an effort to go through and track down who owns that data, how we can get access to it, do we need to copy it over? So this is an area I'm particularly excited and focused on. And then by June, we're hoping that Marketplace will be generally available. And this will include, the full catalog, easy onboarding for non-Databricks customers, and support for the usage analytics around providers. And then I did touch on all of this now, but private preview features really just kind of focused on AWS to start right now. It does say Azure and GCP in March, but again, that's going to be more mid-April. And we have the vendor listings, so you'll see we have a handful, and I'll show the marketplace here momentarily, but we do have vendors out there in over 100 different listings at this point. And in those listings, we do have embedded notebooks, so you can get a quick look at the data. A lot of that includes public free data. So if you're familiar with like the FRED, which is the Federal Reserve data, that's out there and available for instant download. And coming soon will be the solution accelerators, and then any white label listings that want to participate. So again, these are slightly different than let's say instant downloads, but white label listings are the ability for users to access a company's workspace directly. All right, and that is it for the presentation here. I'm going to quickly show Marketplace in its current view. And we should be able to see. So here's Marketplace, similar to some marketplaces that you've seen in other areas, but we'll point out the key differentiators here momentarily. Quickly, being able to go in, searching for whatever providers you want access to. You can search on specific categories. So if you only want to look at, let's say, financial data, and any search characteristics up here. So if you want to type in specific keywords, it'll pull up the different listings that will have that keyword, or you might be associated with it. And then the listings themselves, I'm jumping over to a listing from a partner named Cardo, who deals in mapping or GIS data. You can see the listings, give us details, give us all the information around this particular listing we need. So we see we have the tags around geospatial or demographics, who the provider is, and then all the documentation back to, let's say, their support team or documentation for a given data set. Excuse me. And within these listings, you can see the sample notebooks, and these are, again, embedded, but you can pull the information out of here and use it. But within these notebooks, they go through and do just some basic setup around the data, so you can get that insight quickly. They set their catalog. They're building just some sample queries, so you can kind of see the shape and size of the data. And then they kind of dive into the analysis of the data and visualizations within the notebooks. Within the notebooks on the listing itself. So we can see that they're just mapping out some data here in the UK. And then you'll be able to see all of the other data sets that are available from Cardo down below. Like I said, in the future iterations here, we're talking April, May timeframe, they may have multiple notebooks that they want to associate with this particular data set. And they'll be able to associate those with this listing, and you'd be able to download those sample notebooks directly. And then if you need access to this data, you can hit this get data. And in this particular case, this is data that they have a sample for, or like I said, it could be public data or data that they want to make free. And you would go in, you can give it any catalog name you want. This is the catalog that's been set by default. And then you would just hit this get data button, and it's going to drop that catalog into your data explorer, and you'll be able to run any queries or any analytics on that data directly, as if it was a native catalog in your Lakehouse. So that is it overall for Delta sharing in Marketplace. Happy to stay on and answer any questions. I see that there are a few bouncing back and forth, but please let us know if there's any questions, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear about it.
Tim, did want to clarify, we talked earlier about private link, that would work across regions as well, right?
That I don't know, AJ, directly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you know if we have an
don't know.
internal doc?
We do, and I'll dig that
Okay.
up for you.
Okay, then we can ask
Excuse me.
Stephanie to send that out with the recording. She'll send out a follow-up with the recording.
Perfect.
All right, well, I don't see any other questions. So thanks everyone for attending today. And please do keep looking out for the Skill Builder series. We just released the list for March today, I believe. And it's an exciting list, including a couple of new features. The VS Code extension is going to be a real popular one, I think. So keep on the lookout for that and keep attending. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.